Ruby, Christia, you should be jumping up and down, waving your arms around and crying foul that this leadership race seems fixed from the start.
Donald Trump pushes tariffs off again to March 1st. Dominic LeBlanc gets caught admitting why Parliament isn't being recalled, and Mark Carney openly admits he's already acting like the new Prime Minister before a leadership race has even been won.
Let's take a look.
I also spoke with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, and we had a good talk in the morning, but I did ask him a couple of questions, like, banks aren't allowed to do business in Canada. Canada is very tough. Canada is very, we're not treated well by Canada, and we have to be treated well. Banks are not, as an example, allowed. Did you know that American banks are not allowed to do business in Canada? Can you believe that? And that's one of many things, and we talked about it, and I think we'll win most of the subjects. But for some reason, a lot of things have been very unfair with Canada. I noticed that in the first term. You deal with people, and after a while, you begin to realize, like you learn that Larry Ellison's very tough to do business with, okay? He's a very tough guy. I mean, I'm sure you're shocked to hear that. But Canada is very tough. They're very, very tough to do business with. And we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part. They don't take our cars. They make cars, but they basically don't take our cars. And, we don't need, and look, I think we're going to have another good conversation today. We're actually speaking at 3 o'clock again. But we don't need them to make our cars. We don't need them to give us lumber. We don't need them for agricultural products because we have all the agriculture we need. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part, our milk, dairy, etc. A little bit they do, but not much. We take theirs. And as far as cars are concerned, they took in a big percentage, almost 19% of the market. And, I wouldn't mind making our cars in the United States, so we have a problem there. I'd like to make our cars in the U.S. We don't need Canada to make our cars. With that being said, we're going to have another call at 3 o'clock. We had a call this morning. It was a pretty good call, I'd say.
Okay, so this is one of the issues with President Trump. He makes a whole bunch of claims. Many of them are completely false.
Well, the dairy one was correct.
Yeah,
the dairy one was right because of the dairy cartel. I mean, you guys were worried about us disappearing after the whole CSIS thing. We probably disappeared now after mentioning the dairy cartel.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's the other thing. So he's saying, well, American banks aren't allowed to do business in Canada. Well, here's the thing. They are. It's not like there's a law preventing them. The issue is that our banks are much more regulated than the American banks, hence the 2008 financial crash. So it's just that the American banks don't want to adhere to the Canadian banking industry's regulations.
Now, if he had said about the telecom companies not being permitted to do business in Canada, that is more true, I would say, because the CRTC controls the networks, right? We have Rogers, Telus, Bell, Shaw, and those are the ones we have because we're not letting the American competition come up into Canada. Well,
and it's mainly the big boys that are preventing that from happening because they love their old little monopoly that they have.
Right.
And there was actually a case, I think it was back near 2010, where they were opening up a new cell phone band up in Canada, and I believe it was Verizon. They were considering making a bid on that band, and you better believe all the Canadian telecom companies got up in arms, got together, did this full media blitz campaign, being like, keep this Canadian, keep it Canadian. You were just totally scared out of your mind that they were actually going to bring their American prices up here, which are like half of yours.
Now, there is something to be said for protecting smaller Canadian business because Canada does have about 10% of the population that the States does. And you can say that there is something to be said for protecting Canadian businesses. But at the same time, there's also something to be said for competition.
Well, this is the thing. When the Canadian businesses are essentially acting like, oligarchs and gouging the heck out of Canadians because they have a joint monopoly. Like, this is the thing. When you look between the different cell phone companies, they're basically all the same plants.
And they're getting more and more expensive every year.
And the only reason why Canadians change plans is because when there's a brand new plan that a company puts out, it's never subject to existing members. So you only get the really good deal by changing companies. So this is done by design between these companies so that they will always have an influx of new customers, and they're just bouncing back and forth. And if on the off chance that people are just accepting of their gouging rate when the initial promotion ends because they're just used to paying their bill, then all the better for the company. So that's something to consider there. But that next call that Donald Trump was talking about, that was where it was communicated that the tariffs were going to be pushed off until March 1st, and then the mainstream media news got a hold of that and ran with it.
Let's bring Vashi in now. We've managed to connect with her again. Okay, Vashi, 30-day reprieve.
30-day reprieve. That's the headline, Sandy. Breathe at least a month-long sigh of relief, the Prime Minister putting on X just moments ago. I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. 10,000 also the number of troops that Mexico announced would be heading to their border. The statement goes on to say from the Prime Minister, Sandy, in addition, and this is all new, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I have also, the Prime Minister writes, signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be, backing it up with $200 million. Proposed tariffs, and here is the headline, Sandy, will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together. So the crisis we thought would be taking place as of midnight tonight is averted for at least a month.
So,
you were right.
This sounds familiar.
Yeah.
This sounds familiar.
You were right, as much as his wife, I hate to admit it, you were right.
And what is Tanya talking about? Let's take a look at what happened on Sunday. I think one of two things is going to happen. Either Trump is going to keep pushing out this deadline, kind of like in The Princess Bride, when he keeps, the Dread Pirate Roberts keeps threatening the main character like day after day after day. Oh, yeah, maybe I'll kill you tomorrow.
3 years he said that. Good night, Wesley. Good work. Sleep well. I'm most likely to kill you in the morning.
Until the Conservatives get in, and then all of a sudden they'll disappear.
Plus, you got a little cameo from Pixel there.
Yeah, you got some Pixel Cam on there. So remember, this was going to come into effect the day that he took office.
Sleep well. I'm most likely to kill you in the morning.
And then it wasn't. And then it was going to come into effect a couple of days later.
Sleep well. I'm most likely to kill you in the morning.
And then it didn't. And then it was going to take effect on February 1st.
Sleep well. I'm most likely to kill you in the morning.
Yeah.
And then it didn't. And then it was going to take effect on Tuesday, February 4th.
Sleep well. I'm most likely to kill you in the morning.
Which is today.
And then it didn't. And
now it's being pushed back to what, March 4th?
March 1st.
March 1st.
So we're getting closer and closer and closer to A, the Liberal leadership race, and B, the next election.
But if you heard what Vashi said, she said at least 30 days.
Yes.
So it could be longer. It could be a year. It could be 5 weeks. Like, we have no idea. So at least 30 days is all we've got to go on.
And the closer that this gets to that supplying confidence vote, the more reason Donald Trump is going to have to just push it off until the new government comes in.
Sleep well. I'm most likely to kill you in the morning.
So this is this getting interesting, folks. So is this about the border? No. I think this is about Donald Trump absolutely loving watching Justin Trudeau squirm. And Justin Trudeau committing to a bunch of things. You heard Vashi talk about them. This is all Donald Trump language. We don't have terms like czar.
No, I was going to say that's not a very Canadian post, right? We don't call it like the border czar or the fentanyl czar, the tariffs czar, whatever. We don't use that term here. What term do we use instead? I mean, we have ministers for different departments.
That's it.
But we don't have like a czar. It's very weird.
We have minister and deputy minister. And quick history lesson for those that don't know. So the term czar, you may all know, is a Russian term. It was essentially the title for the king, and czar, C-Z-A-R, actually is derived from ancient Rome when they had their emperor Caesar, which they called everybody Caesar. So the Russians actually adapted the title Caesar to czar, and that became the head of the Russian Empire. So it's interesting that the Trump administration likes to use that term for their officials. But whatever it is, Donald Trump got Justin Trudeau to use it to appoint a fentanyl czar. That's great. And sounds like he capitulated to just about everything that Donald Trump asked. Now, there's also this issue with the $1.3 billion.
Right. I was just going to ask, the reason we didn't put this video out yesterday is because we've been trying to figure out, where is this money supposed to come from? I mean, ultimately, we know it comes from the taxpayers, but without Parliament in session, without a money vote, which is a confidence vote, where is this going to come from?
So here's my thoughts on this, because I have done some research on this. The only way this could be new money is if there was a designated emergency and there was a special warrant issued in order to unlock some money. So that's not the case.
How likely is that to happen?
I don't think it's likely at all.
Okay.
Because I think what Trudeau is trying to do, successfully maybe, is to pull a fast one. He's saying, okay, well, what's a bunch of stuff that we already spend on the border? Okay, so that adds up to, how many hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, well, CBSA and RCMP, you need to scrap sections of your budget and you're going to reallocate that to this. And he can do that because that money has already been approved for these different agencies. They can reallocate that money.
I was going to say, can they do it across agencies, not just within agencies?
No.
Okay, so they can't go to like Canada Food Inspection Agency and be like, hey, guess what? You got to cough up, $1.3 billion.
Yeah, the
for
RCMP
us.
can't give the CBSA a bunch of their money. They can spend a bunch of money on things, but and reallocate it. That's about it. So this is what I think's happening. Is it's a combination of, there's money already in play, there's resources that were already purchased, and he's just adding that in as smoke and mirrors to that 1.3 billion. And part of it is probably not even spent yet. It's just commitment to spend, right? Because Trudeau hasn't said we've spent $1.3 billion. He hasn't said that.
He's not phrasing it that way.
He's saying we're implementing our 1.3. So the other possibility is he spent nothing.
Well, I was going to say, if you are implementing a $1.3 billion initiative and you spend, say, $50 million, are you not implementing part of that initiative?
You can go buy a pencil.
You'll do the rest later.
Yeah, you can go buy a pencil, because a recent article came out today that Minister LeBlanc is already working on the 2025 budget. So that could be part of implementing, right? Now,
what I do find very interesting today, if you go on Facebook and you look at the different Conservative MPs, they are all calling for Parliament to be reconvened to deal with this mess. So I'm thinking a few things about this. I don't think they want to support Trudeau in this endeavor. I think they want Parliament reconvened so that they can call a non-confidence vote sooner rather than later. Or I think maybe they want Parliament reconvened so that Prime Minister Trudeau can say, okay, we need to spend $1.3 billion and this is what we need to spend it on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That will automatically be a confidence vote if it is a new money request, which it is, and the Conservatives can vote it down.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. Even that process of how he recalls Parliament, if he just ends prorogation, then there has to be a throne speech. If it's an emergency recall, which is possible, then that would be to deal with a specific issue like this $1.3 billion. But this is going to be problematic because Dominic LeBlanc kind of got caught with his pants down around his proverbial political ankles a day before this all went down. Take a look.
And workers.
What if though, Minister, with all respect, you do need to come to Parliament to have, extraordinary measures like during the pandemic, like CERB, like whatever it happens to be. I mean, we're talking about an entire industry, the backbone of the most populous province in this country, which could collapse in a week. And are you really telling Canadians that their parliamentarians shouldn't be debating, discussing, representing them in deciding how to best address this? And what message does that send to the U.S.?
We'll make all the decisions necessary to support workers and businesses. So if that circumstance that you described turns out to be the case, obviously we would do what is necessary.
So you're not going to avoid it just to stave off an election, to be clear?
Well, but again, therein lies the contradiction. The opposition parties have vowed at the first opportunity to cause an election.
Right before this, which we didn't want to subject you to because he spoke for 3 minutes straight, he essentially said, well, we have all the tools that we need. We have all the tools that we need.
Therefore, that's why we don't need to recall Parliament.
Right.
Yeah.
So his justification is we don't need to recall Parliament right now because we have everything that we need in order to actually handle this crisis. And what Vashi is saying, well, but you will need to recall if the whole auto sector, that's what she's talking about, the entire auto sector collapses a week after these tariffs are put in. That would absolutely crush the auto sector.
Well, there's already articles floating around Hamilton's local papers saying that there's been huge problems because buyers in the States have already canceled their orders for Hamilton steel.
Yep.
So all these poor people are going to be out of a job.
And they're already looking at, reduced production, right?
Yep.
As a result of that. So this is the issue. And this is where Trump's saying, oh, well, we'll just make our own cars.
What are you going to make them out of? SpaghettiOs?
Well,
come on.
But here's the other thing. Dude, you can't just say tomorrow we're going to start making everything in the States. It is such a integrated network of auto organizations. They have factories here that make certain parts, factories in Canada that make certain parts. They exchange these parts across the border, add to them, and
it's like any relationship, especially a long-term one, whether it's a friendship or a business partnership or a marriage. You don't just end it one day and continue on your life exactly the same the very next day. There's a lot of things that you need to rebuild on your own.
If you've been with your significant other, say 10 years, now, imagine that times 10. So we've essentially been intertwined with the United States for over 100 years from an industrial perspective. You can't just unwind that like that.
Right.
So this is the issue. And now when he's pressed on this saying, okay, so you're not going to come back even if it's to avoid an election. He's like, well, therein lies the problem.
So it is to avoid an election.
It's a guaranteed way to make sure that Parliament doesn't meet for 2 or 3 more months. So they can't have it both ways. You can't say, hurry up, bring Parliament back because we want to have an election, which would mean that Parliament would not be
the timing is essentially set off by the Prime Minister deciding at the point he did to vacate his position. I mean, it's not the opposition's fault that he waited until he did.
The issue is, does the government have the necessary instruments and programs to support sectors of the economy and workers? The answer is yes.
So LeBlanc's comment is that the Conservatives can't say, well, we need to come back to Parliament just to shut everything down and go to election, which was honestly one of the things that I was kind of thinking about when I saw all these posts on Facebook today by the various MPs that I follow. How will it look if you guys are saying we need to go back to Parliament just to call an election right away? But the difference is that with Parliament prorogued right now, it's not set to come back until the 24th of March, which is a Monday. And that's 7 weeks away? You could call Parliament back tomorrow, being Wednesday, vote the House down pretty much immediately and go to election, and it will be resolved and we will have our election faster than when we will come back from prorogation on March the 24th.
Right. So doesn't fly. And he can't just keep pivoting back and forth. Well, the reason why we're not going back is because we have all the tools. Well, the reason why we're not going back is because all the opposition parties want to call an election. Well, the reason why we're not going back is because we have all the tools.
Canadians are fed up. We don't want a prorogation. We want a competent government. What Justin Trudeau has done with the help of the NDP, let me remind you, because they could have voted non-confidence back in December. They also could have done it back in September, and they chose not to. And that's why we are where we are right now. But they have left such a power vacuum in Ottawa that there's nobody to deal with this. We're supposed to, wait 7 weeks until prorogation is finished and then wait another, I guess it would be 6 to 8 weeks for an election. How about we just call Parliament back right now, and in 6 to 8 weeks we can have our election?
Well, and again, the Liberals are trying to paint Danielle Smith as this rogue person. Oh, you're not Team Canada. You're not Team Canada. Do you know who Danielle Smith is accountable to, Trudeau?
The people of Alberta.
Alberta. She's not accountable to the people of Ontario. She's not accountable to the people of Nova Scotia. And I'm saying this as an Ontarian. If Doug Ford, who's been in,
power forever,
and he hasn't done a great job, if he was doing something for BC at the expense of Ontario, guess what? Ontarians would be ticked off at him, and rightly so. Just as if Danielle Smith said, okay, well, you know what? We're just going to kill the oil sector because, the rest of Canada, says we're supposed to do that. Guess who would be ticked off? And rightly so. Everybody in Alberta.
Because she is their representative in their provincial legislature.
Right. The issue here, you can't blame any of the individual MPs. You have to blame the situation that the Liberal government put Canada in.
Right.
Which is a lame duck prime minister, someone that Donald Trump knows is going to be gone in a month. So why would Donald Trump take anything this guy says seriously? This is the whole issue. So, don't even. And never mind that the Liberals are just trying to, stay afloat as much as possible for one reason and one reason only, to get this leadership race done.
The Liberals selfishly did this by proroguing Parliament, calling a leadership race, and putting off our election with the help of the NDP, don't forget. But they did this for their own means. They had zero concern for Canadians when they made these decisions.
Now, what does this mean, right? This means that prices aren't going up right now for either Canadians or Americans, right? So when Canadians put tariffs on American goods, prices go up for Canadians. And when American put tariffs on for Canadian goods, prices go up for Americans. Both countries are slowing down their purchasing of each other's products because they don't know when this may come to pass.
Right. It's extremely volatile right now.
So, that's why you see this, Buy Canada campaign. Hypocritical from the Liberals, by the way, Team Canada, Unite Canada. I thought we were a post-nation state and nationalism wasn't a thing anymore, but whatever.
Whatever suits them, right? They pander.
So, anyhow, but you have all this going on. So that's not going to hit your pocketbooks. That's a good thing. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, some really shady stuff is going on. And it's behind the scenes, but this is where Mark Carney seems to be so inept as a politician that he's decided to broadcast it for all to see. Take a look at this. This is on Mark Carney's website, folks. So it's not like this was some secretly leaked thing. Mark Carney put this out himself. The following statement was issued by Mark Carney, candidate for leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. The tariffs imposed by the United States today are a clear violation of our trade agreements and require the most serious trade and economic responses in our history. I am in regular contact with Foreign Minister Melanie Joly. I fully support her efforts along with those of Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Mark Miller and Minister of Public Safety David McGuinty as they meet with their American counterparts. I stand four square behind them. So I just have one question. Mark Carney, you are positioning yourself as an outsider, that you're new to this game. You don't have any ins with this. You're not Prime Minister yet. So why do you have cabinet reporting to you? Can you explain that to Canadians? Maybe explain that to your other competitors. Because I'm pretty sure Ruby Dalla, Chrystia Freeland, and the other competitors don't have cabinet ministers that are in active trade negotiations coming to them, giving them briefings on what's going on down south. Pretty sure that's an unfair advantage in the Liberal leadership race.
Is that even permitted? Because Carney is not Prime Minister, not yet at least, if he ever becomes Prime Minister. And there is such a thing as cabinet confidence.
Well, there sure is. So the question is what is he being told? The problem is he's admitting that he's being told a bunch of stuff. I'm in regular contact, implying that as they get updates, he's getting updates. Well, you're not even elected official, buddy. And all this is doing is reinforcing the worst kept secret in Canada, which is the Liberal Party wants to anoint you as the leader of the Liberal Party.
Why even have the race? Why not just install him if that's what they want?
So, Ruby, Chrystia, you should be jumping up and down, waving your arms around and crying foul that this leadership race seems fixed from the start. And Canadians, if this is how Mark Carney is acting now, you do not want to be voting for this guy to legitimize him in the next general election. I can tell you that.